I'm a software engineer by trade. So when my buddy Nick called to tell me about this multiplayer game he was obsessed with, I was intrigued. He said it was called Ascendance, and you basically went on this massive online quest as a team, slaying dragons, amassing treasures, the usual stuff. I'm not a huge gamer, but I was up for anything new and Nick was genuinely hyped. I bought the game and we dove in. The game itself was intense. We had a motley crew, a mage, an archer, a rogue, and my warrior. We spent hours strategizing, solving puzzles, and battling everything that came our way. One night, while we were tackling a raid, something strange happened. My character suddenly froze mid-attack. Nick and I both tried to correct the glitch, but nothing helped. Then, just below the frozen image of my guy on my screen, I saw some text appear, "Help me." I stared at it, wondering if it was a game glitch. "Nick, something's up," I said, but he didn't respond. My screen suddenly went dark, and I wondered if our internet had crashed again. But then I realized I could still hear the game audio. Nick's character was still battling. "Nick?" I called out, but there was no response. I looked back at the screen and saw something move in the darkness. A hand with long, bony fingers reached up from the bottom of the screen, as if it was trying to pull itself out of the monitor. I gasped and jumped back in my chair. "Nick, what's going on?" I shouted, my voice cracking. Silence. Then the hand vanished and my game screen flickered back to life. My character was still frozen, but the "help me" text had vanished. "Nick, answer me," I yelled. Still silence. I could only hear his character hacking away, oblivious to me. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I grabbed my phone and dialed Nick. No answer. Over and over I called, but it just went to voicemail. At that point, my gut told me to run. I stood up and was about to unplug the computer when Nick's game avatar suddenly screamed. On my screen, the rogue was cleaved in two by a horrifying shadowy figure that came out of nowhere. It was like he'd been ripped apart. "Nick!" I screamed, my fingers fumbling on the power cord. But it was too late. Nick's computer screen went dark, and the line went dead. He was gone. I spent that night alone, lying in the dark, unable to sleep. I kept thinking about Nick and that horrific figure that had taken him. Was it a glitch? Or was something truly sinister happening in that game? The next morning, I called the police, Nick's family, and everyone I could think of. As of today, they're treating it as a missing persons case, but I know better. Nick is trapped in that game, and that horrifying hand is what took him. I had just finished work late that night, and I was feeling really tired. I just wanted to get home, eat, and relax playing my favorite video games. The bus had stopped working early, so I had to walk 15 minutes home from my stop. I was drained. I see a cab turn and it stops right in front of me. The sign is lit up. It was my lucky night. I open the door, throw my backpack in, and sit in the back seat. There was a guy driving in the front seat and two German shepherds in the back seat. I was a bit shocked as the guy didn't even tell me the price, so I asked him, "How much is it?" And he just replied, "No worries, my treat." You know, I'm a gamer just like you. I was taken aback. He started driving and asked me, "So, your place is close to the park, right?" And I replied, "What park?" He seemed a bit taken aback by my question, and he just said, "The one you go every Sunday with your friend." I was really alarmed. No one else knew about that, and the guy didn't even ask where I wanted to go. I told him I wanted to get off the cab, and he started becoming violent. He was shouting, "Please no, no, I need you, man." I reached for my backpack to grab my phone, but he quickly blocked me. My pulse was at 1,000 an hour, and I was becoming dizzy. The dogs were very calm. They were just looking at me. I then understood that those two were not with that guy. They seemed like they were so familiar with the interior of the cab, so they were definitely his, but I had this rush of adrenaline and I started shouting at the dogs to attack him. The guy was in shock. He punched me in the mouth, and I responded by shouting at the dogs and kicking at the guy at the same time. One of the dogs got a hold of the guy's arm and started biting it, while the other one was holding back the guy that was now desperately trying to get rid of the dog. I kicked the guy out of the cab and he collapsed on the floor. I quickly jumped out of the car and ran home as fast as I could. I turned back to see if the man had got back in the car, and I saw him just standing there on the street, still trying to fight with the dogs. This is the scariest moment of my life, and I will never forget this. I never saw that guy again, but I always think of what could have happened if that dog somehow hadn't helped me. Every Sunday I go for a walk with my best friend, and once I mentioned that detail to my friend, we both realized it couldn't have been just a coincidence. I shudder at the thought of what could have happened to me if I had gone home earlier that day. He was waiting for me, and I didn't get to know why, but I was sure that if I would have gone outside, I would have found him with a weapon in his hand, waiting for me to do a move. I spent the whole night in bed terrified, in the fetal position, waiting for a noise, for a step, for a sign of life that could sentence me to death. However, it didn't happen. The new day came, and all I could think was to call the police. The officer that came was very helpful, and he decided to check the surroundings of my house to look for any evidence that could help him understand what had happened the night before or if there was something strange going on. He came back after some time and he found something. It was a small piece of paper, and in that paper I could see a logo. The logo of the delivery service that I had used the previous week to order some parts for my car. I really like spending time playing video games in front of my computer. It is really one of my favorite pastimes and moments in the day. That evening, the last game I decided to try was my new favorite one, a very exciting online racing game. A while after I started, I could hear a harsh wind outside while rain was noisily hitting my windows. The fact is that every sound was so clear and fearsome that I decided to stop playing for a bit and to close the window. I closed my game, got up from my chair, and approached the windows. After closing them, I returned back to my chair, but before I could sit, I froze. I suddenly noticed a terrifying noise that left me immediately stunned and alert. I could hear slow and steady footsteps walking back and forward. They were coming from the other side of my main door, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought it was impossible. I checked if my door was locked, and I was relieved because it was. Nobody could be in front of my door, and I really didn't understand where those steps were coming from. It was not a paranoia. I wasn't imagining it. There were real steps. Someone really was outside my door. My heart was beating heavily against my chest. I approached the door, immediately unlocking it and suddenly flinging it open. To my huge relief, there was no one in front of my door. It felt as if I was waking up from a terrible dream, a real nightmare. I decided to remain still while I looked outside, and I noticed another extremely strange thing. My bike, the one I always leave in front of my house locked to the stairs railing, wasn't there anymore. I had a terrible sensation in my stomach. That bike was impossible to find. I wanted to reach for my phone to call the police, but that bike wasn't a cheap one, and I really had to go and check. I closed the door behind me as quietly as I could, and I run down the stairs. I had my keys ready in my hand, and I walked very slowly toward the spot where my bike should have been. I really couldn't believe what I was seeing. The bike wasn't there anymore because it had simply been turned upside down. I felt a chill running down my back. The person wasn't there anymore, but I could understand he had been there. Putting my bike back on its wheels, I immediately rushed back inside, closing the door and locking it again. I sprinted toward the desk and started playing my game again, trying not to listen to the freezing, chilling wind outside and, every once in a while, the annoying yet terrifying sound of the rain hitting against my windows. The game started to get intense, and I could momentarily forget about everything. I wasn't even thinking about the creepy little incident of a few minutes ago. When I realized it, it was already really late, and since it was a weekday, I decided it was time to go bed. I turned off my gaming computer and the lights, and I got up to go to bed. When I got close to my bedroom, I realized I forgot to close my front door. I hurried up and I closed it, and I tried to twist the key lock as slowly and quietly as I could. I sped up toward my bed as quickly as possible when I suddenly noticed I couldn't move. My stomach froze, my skin felt cold and pulsating. There were steps again, and someone definitely was in front of my door. They weren't creepy, they weren't slow, they were resolute, heavy, and confident steps. As I could hear these steady, slow, and resonant steps, I couldn't help it but thinking this person had a very bad, hostile, and violent intention. I couldn't decide if these steps would be my last, if this was the last day of my life. I slowly turned and I looked in front of my bedroom door. I hesitantly opened the door and looked outside, expecting the worst. To my stupor, my bedroom was empty and there was no one there. Right when I was starting to think my mind or my eyes were deceiving me, I could hear the footsteps again. They were not in front of my bedroom door anymore, but they were outside my house. They were at my front door. The steps were slow and extremely heavy, and I could hear the person walking on the gravel outside my house. It felt as if he was going back and forward, as if he was searching for something. For endless, terrifying minutes that seemed to freeze the time and the air around me, all I could hear was the grave, cold, thick sound of these menacing footsteps moving on the gravel outside my house. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and the massive amount of adrenaline and fear running through my veins by then were making me shake. Then suddenly it stopped. The steps stopped, and at that moment I couldn't breathe anymore. I was shaking. My eyes were wet and I was completely drained. I thought I was going to die. I thought my last day had come. However, there was something worse than death in the way this menacing, cruel person was walking in front of my house. He didn't walk like a thief, he didn't walk like a criminal, he didn't walk like a burglar, he walked like a hunter. He was stalking me, and he probably had a gun or a knife. I was absolutely sure of it.